Louisiana is different than other states. It didn't start out as a British colony. In the 1500s and 1600s, countries in Europe like Great Britain, France, and Spain claimed land in the Americas. Britain claimed land along the east coast of North America, but France claimed Louisiana, a vast amount of land in the middle of the continent. Later, France and Britain had a war over disputed land. In America, this war is known as the French and Indian War. France had a feeling they might lose this war, so rather than losing all of Louisiana to their arch-enemy Great Britain, they secretly gave it to their ally Spain. When the French and Indian War ended, the map of North America changed drastically. Britain ended up with most everything to the east of the Mississippi, while Spain ended up with most of the land to the west of the Mississippi, including Louisiana. That's how Louisiana became Spanish and why they had Spanish governors. Bernardo de Gálvez was one of those Spanish governors. Although he wasn't the first, he holds a very important place in history. He led Louisiana during the American Revolution. After growing up in the Malaga region of Spain, Gálvez's uncle Jose, whose power was second only to the King of Spain, helped him gain important positions. Early in his career, he served in the French and Spanish military. Later, he came to the New World and served as a captain in the Spanish army. He led forces against the Apache in the frontier areas of New Spain. Later, Gálvez was chosen by Alejandro O'Reilly, former Louisiana governor and close friend to the King of Spain, to be the colonel of the 6th Regiment in Louisiana. By January 1st, 1777, he was the acting governor of Louisiana. Gálvez was given 2 key instructions. First, make Spain popular among the people of Louisiana. And second, prepare for war. Spain knew it was just a matter of time before they'd get involved in war against the British in the area. Gálvez soon became popular among the locals. He was fun to be around, he loved music and dancing, he even played guitar. He also fell head over heels in love with a local girl, Felicitas San Maxan, daughter of a Louisiana merchant. Gálvez accomplished his first order of business. Now he must prepare for war. The American Revolution began between American colonists and Great Britain in 1775. Spain didn't mind the fact that their old enemy, Great Britain, might be weakened by war. So, Spain decided to secretly help the American colonists. Through Gálvez's efforts, Spain made vital supplies available to the Americans like ammo, weapons, uniforms, medicine, and cash. Knowing that Spain may have to get involved in the fighting, Gálvez needed to build up his military. His forces were diverse, representative of Louisiana at that time. They were Spaniards, some from the Malaga region of Spain, others were Isleños from the Spanish Canary Islands, the local Louisiana militia, including French and Acadian regiments, as well as free black regiments. There were American volunteers, and indigenous groups like the Choctaw and Homa. In June of 1779, after forming an alliance with France, Spain declared war on Great Britain. To his misfortune, a hurricane hit Louisiana. It sank ships, drowned livestock, and destroyed crops. But Gálvez didn't let this setback stop him. He was determined to go ahead with his plans. In late August of 1779, Gálvez marched his men out of New Orleans and headed towards Manchac. The fort there was not very strong. In fact, the British commander, Lieutenant Colonel Dixon, abandoned the fort, leaving it with only 20 German mercenaries on guard as he headed to a stronger fort in Baton Rouge. The Battle of Manchac was short and sweet. Gálvez and his men attacked the fort early in the morning of September 7, 1779. Within minutes, after the loss of one of their soldiers, the British surrendered. Gálvez, losing none of his men, took the remaining British troops prisoner, resting and celebrating their victory for just a few days. With Governor Gálvez's blessing, an American privateer, crewed with both American and Spanish men, patrolled Lake Pontchartrain. Leading this privateer was Captain William Pickles, an American who disguised his boat with a British flag. Soon, they spotted the British West Florida. As they approached the West Florida, they quickly removed the British flag, raised an American flag, and attacked. The Americans were victorious. even mortally wounding the British captain of the West Florida. This event became known as the Battle of Lake Pontchartrain. In the meantime, Gálvez arrived in Baton Rouge. This battle would be more challenging than Manchac. Its fort was on a bluff overlooking the Mississippi, it had cannons, it was surrounded by an 18-foot wide ditch, wooden defenses, and an earthen wall. And it was protected by a force of around 400 men commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Dixon. Yup, the same guy that abandoned the fort at Manchac. Gálvez devised a risky plan. He sent a small group of his men north of the fort and instructed them to make lots of noise. They hoped to trick the British into expecting an attack from that direction. Meanwhile, most of Gálvez's men were busy preparing to strike from the opposite side. His plan worked perfectly. Gálvez and his troops inflicted major damage to the British fort, and by 3:30 p.m., Colonel Dixon surrendered. Gálvez was quite clever. When negotiating the surrender, he demanded that both the fort at Baton Rouge and one upriver in Natchez were part of the agreement. Colonel Dixon had no choice but to accept the terms. The Battle of Baton Rouge was a success. With word from his scouts that defenses were lacking, Gálvez set his sights on his next target, Mobile, and control of the Gulf of Mexico. He was joined by William Pickles, victor of the Battle of Lake Pontchartrain. In fact, he captained the very boat he captured in that battle, the West Florida, now called the Galveztown. Gálvez and his fleet ran into some problems: winter storms and ships that had to be unloaded and abandoned after running aground. Their luck improved when they were joined by backup from Cuba. This added 1,400 more Spanish troops and lots of supplies to their force. Gálvez sent some of his men on a mission to scout the fort at Mobile. Discovered by the British, they were fired upon. In response, one of Gálvez's ships moved into the Mobile River and fired a few shells in the direction of the fort. The Battle of Mobile had begun. Later, Gálvez sent his lieutenant governor Francisco Bouligny through enemy lines to meet with the British commander of the fort, Elias Durnford. Explaining that he was greatly outnumbered, Bouligny urged Durnford to surrender. He refused. Oddly enough, Durnford asked the lieutenant governor to stay for dinner. This was really a plot to delay the fighting. Durnford was waiting for backup to arrive from Pensacola. Soon, Gálvez's troops inched dangerously close to the fort. They began their siege. The fort was greatly damaged. Durnford's backup from Pensacola was too late. Realizing the situation was hopeless, Durnford raised the flag of truce. The guns fell silent. Durnford promised a formal surrender as long as his remaining troops could head for the British stronghold of Pensacola. Gálvez refused, demanding that any remaining British troops be taken prisoner. With no other choice, Durnford accepted the terms and surrendered on March 14, 1780. Pensacola, the capital of British West Florida, was all that stood between Gálvez and control of the Gulf. Unbelievably, his plans to attack were delayed by a hurricane. Finally, in February of 1781, Gálvez, along with his reinforcements from Cuba, headed to Pensacola. This would no doubt be his greatest challenge yet. Pensacola, under the command of Major General John Campbell, was the most fortified position in all of West Florida. To attack, Gálvez would have to bring his ships through a single narrow opening into the harbor. The problem was that he and the other Spanish captains were not familiar with the best route to get their ships through safely. On their first attempt into the bay, one of their lead ships ran aground and had to be offloaded. After the incident, Gálvez and his squadron commander met to discuss their options. The commander declared that entering the bay was too dangerous and suggested an alternate plan. Gálvez would not be deterred. He decided to take matters into his own hands. He alone would enter the bay with the 4 ships he commanded from Louisiana. It was a risky and daring move. On the afternoon of March 18, 1781, Gálvez led his small fleet into the harbor. British fire ripped through his sails, but he kept going. They made it. He anchored his ships in Pensacola Bay, where they could be protected by Spanish troops positioned on Santa Rosa Island. The Spanish troops cheered in awe as they witnessed this brave feat. His actions were legendary, making Gálvez an instant hero. After a bit of tension between Gálvez and the other Spanish captains, the remaining Spanish ships entered the harbor. British guns fired but missed. The Spanish ships were just out of reach. Once the fighting began, Gálvez moved his troops closer and closer to the fortifications in Pensacola. During the battle, Gálvez was almost killed. Luckily, his wounds were not deadly. After a few days, he was back in the middle of the action. More Spanish reinforcements came, increasing the total number of forces fighting against the British to over 7,000 men. At one point, Gálvez had over 1,000 men in trenches so he could attack the fort of Pensacola. During the siege, the Spanish army fired at the British around the clock. The British fired back, but couldn't keep up. In an unexpected and dramatic twist, it all came to an end. By chance, on the morning of May 8, 1781, a shot from a Spanish howitzer landed just as the British opened the door to their powder magazine. This lucky shot resulted in a massive explosion, killing more than 75 men and wounding dozens more in an instant. By that afternoon, General Campbell surrendered. To mark the occasion, Gálvez directed his ships to fire 21 gun salutes. The Battle of Pensacola was the longest battle of the American Revolution. Gálvez continued to lead Spanish forces against the British in the Caribbean until the war ended in 1783. King Carlos of Spain honored Gálvez for his bravery in several ways. He gave him the title of Viscount of Galveztown. That's a title of nobility. He added a gold fleur-de-lis to Gálvez's coat of arms. This came about due to requests from the people of Louisiana. In fact, Gálvez thanked the people of Louisiana for this honor in a letter. "This is proof of your love for me and a public testimony of my good conduct toward you." Most notably, the king added a small ship and the phrase "yo solo" to his coat of arms. This phrase means "I alone." It honors Gálvez's courage for entering Pensacola Bay alone. Not long after his time in Louisiana, Gálvez was promoted to become the Viceroy of New Spain. Gálvez died on November 30th, 1786 from a fever at the age of 40. And so ended the incredible life and career of this lesser-known Spanish hero who greatly contributed to the American Revolution and to the birth of our new nation. George Washington included Gálvez's memory as part of his first inauguration ceremony in April of 1789. He had Gálvez's legendary ship, the Galvestown, fire 13 salutes representing the 13 victorious colonies over the British. Numerous cities, bodies of water, roads, and plazas have been named after him, including Galveston, Texas, and Galvez Plaza in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Statues have been constructed and displayed to honor him around the country. In 2014, President Obama even signed a resolution making Gálvez an honorary citizen of the United States. Around the same time, a portrait of Gálvez that was promised to be placed in the U.S. Capitol in 1783 was finally put on display. Okay, it was only 231 years late, but better late than never, right?